Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to In the City, a podcast from Bloomberg about the stories important to the City of London. I'm Francine Lacqua. We're bringing you something special today. You'll be hearing an interview we did with the UK's new Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, when she came into Bloomberg offices in London earlier today. Afterwards, we'll also be joined by Bloomberg's UK economy senior reporter, Phil Aldrick, as we debrief the interview.
Welcome to the City of London.
The City of
The City of London.
The next station is Bank. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
The financial heart of the country.
The City.
The City.
Welcome to In the City.
Stand clear of the doors, please.
Chancellor, thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg. It's been 2 weeks since the UK election. You've certainly hit the ground running. Today, there was also, talk about this fiscal lock-in. Why do you feel the need to do that?
We've introduced to Parliament today the Budget Responsibility Bill that was first announced in the King's Speech just yesterday. And the purpose of this bill is to provide the fiscal lock so that never again can a Prime Minister or a Chancellor do what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did with their disastrous mini-budget just under 2 years ago. So this will mean that the Office of Budget Responsibility, the independent office, can always provide a forecast when there are significant and permanent tax and spending changes, specifically worth more than 1% of GDP. That would have meant it would have triggered an OBR forecast back when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng introduced that disastrous mini-budget.
And so that, I guess, is something that investors will, take solace to. You've announced a lot. The Prime Minister said that you will achieve that 2.5% target. Are you confident that's achievable?
So the purpose of today really was to give businesses, give investors that confidence that Britain is a stable place to invest and do business. I'm determined to do that. We were elected 2 weeks ago on a mandate to grow our economy based on that stability that is so essential to underpin any economic decision making. And so that's why this bill is so important. Now, look, I'm under no illusions about the scale of the challenge that I face in this job. There are going to be difficult decisions ahead, but I was really clear during the election that everything that we put forward, whether that is on the NHS or on defence or on tax policy, will always be fully costed and fully funded. That's very different to what we've had these last 14 years, with decisions with no regard to where the money's going to come from. And I'm going to be different.
And Chancellor, I mean, a lot, of course, of what you're trying to put in place will depend on private capital coming into the UK. Have you had discussions with institutions, investors, even pension funds, of their willingness to come to the UK?
You're absolutely right that our plans to grow the economy depend on businesses and investors choosing Britain as a place to invest. And I want investors to look at Britain and see a country that's got a stable government with a clear mandate to grow the economy and chooses Britain as a stable place to invest in an increasingly volatile and uncertain world, which is why the fiscal lock today is so important. But also the other changes we've announced in the last 2 weeks. We have announced more policies to grow the economy than the last government did in 14 years. In the first 72 hours in the job, I made more comprehensive changes to the UK planning system than the previous government did in more than a decade, because I know that we need to unlock that private investment that businesses tell me they are ready to invest if we get rid of some of those blockages. And the blockages in the planning system, I think, are more significant than anything else. And so those changes to bring back mandatory housing targets for local authorities, ending the moratorium on onshore wind, calling in planning decisions on data centres and on housing, really crucial, both to send a signal to business that Britain is a place to invest, but also to make sure that we can get on with things and get building in Britain again.
And are they listening? Have you gotten calls from big investors saying, yes, that's a plan that I wanted to see and I'm in?
Absolutely. So in my first speech at the Treasury a week and a half ago, we had businesses, we had investors in the audience, met afterwards. The following day, we announced the creation of a national wealth fund, work led by Mark Carney, the task force led by Mark Carney for the Labour Party when we were in opposition, now reporting to a Labour government. And on that wealth fund task force, we also had Amanda Blank from Aviva, Venkat from Barclays, Antonio from L&G, and other big UK investors. And that is absolutely crucial because there's no plans that I can draw up in my new office in the Treasury that are going to work unless we have business buy-in. And I hope that businesses saw in Labour's manifesto and also in the plans that we've announced in government have the fingerprints of business all over them, because these plans have been co-written with business because they're all about unlocking private sector investment into our economy.
Chancellor, are you considering tax breaks to either boost pension savings or make UK investments more attractive?
I'm not going to announce any tax breaks or tax changes without saying where the money is going to come from. And we will have a budget later this year. But I also just need to be really clear and honest about the scale of the challenge that we've inherited with the public finances. We're going to have to make difficult decisions. We need to fix the foundations before we can start rebuilding things in Britain. But unlike the previous government, I am going to be honest about the scale of the challenge. I'm going to level with people, and together we're going to rebuild our country based on that private sector business investment to get our economy growing. Because I asked the Treasury officials to give me an assessment of how much stronger the UK economy would be today if we'd have grown at just the average rate of OECD economies these last 14 years. And the answer is we'd be £140 billion bigger today, worth £5,000 for every family in Britain. We have got to grow our economy. It's the only way to improve living standards, keep taxes low, and have the money that we need for our dilapidated public services.
Chancellor, you're also promising to reset the relationship with European partners. Are there any quick wins there to be had?
Well, the Prime Minister is hosting European leaders at Blenheim Palace in England today, and that's really important as a chance to reset those relationships and foster a new era of trust between the UK and our nearest neighbours and trading partners in Europe, and we're determined to do that. It doesn't mean going back into the single market or customs union or bringing back free movement of labour, but it does mean having a closer trading relationship and also building a stronger strategic security alignment with our neighbours in Europe, given the threats that we face as a continent. And so Blenheim Palace just today is a chance for us to begin to reset those relationships and foster a stronger relationship between Britain and our neighbours and allies in Europe.
But Chancellor, are there any industries that you would see, again, a win in terms of parallel, kind of, some of the laws being together?
Well, there's a number of areas where we would like to make some changes to the deal that the previous government secured. We would like the mutual recognition of professional qualifications to help our services sector, reduce the bureaucracy for our cultural industries when touring around Europe, and a veterinary agreement to help our fantastic food and farming sector in Britain. That will require negotiation, and that will require give and take on both sides. But we want to boost our trade, make it easier for great British businesses, big and small, to sell goods and services right across Europe.
Given the challenges you were mentioning, when can we expect a budget from you? September or October?
Well, I said in my first speech as Chancellor of the Exchequer last Monday that before the summer recess, I would come to Parliament with an update on the fiscal position, the spending inheritance that this incoming Labour government is now having to deal with. And I will set out, when we do that statement, the date for the budget in the autumn.
But do you see that being a 3 to 5 year spending review, or does it need to be shorter to make sure that the OBR then takes into account the growth you're expecting?
Well, we will set out those the details and the dates when I come to the House of Commons in July. But Francine, that I want to bring back stability to the UK economy, and that means giving certainty to businesses and families, the state of the public finances, what we're going to do to put them on a firmer footing. But all that depends on bringing growth back back to our economy so that we can repair our public services, repair our public finances, and ensure that living standards increase, that working people are better off by bringing investment, bringing business back to Britain.
But Chancellor, for that growth target, is it 2.5% for next year, or is that something that you'll have to assess?
Oh, our ambition is to have the fastest growing economy in the G7 with good jobs and productivity growth in all parts of the UK. And that's why all the announcements that I've made since becoming Chancellor, the planning reform, the creation of the National Wealth Fund, the fiscal lock that we've introduced to Parliament today are all about bringing the stability, investment and reform to our economy so that we can grow our economy and be competitive in that global economy again.
So difficult to put a number on it?
I'm not going to put a number on it, and it's in the end up to the Office of Budget Responsibility to make those forecasts. But I'm doing everything within my power, working with my colleagues in the Cabinet to ensure that we are pursuing a pro-growth, a pro-business agenda to bring investment back to Britain, because investment is the bedrock of a strong, successful economy. We have the lowest share of investment of any G7 economy. I want to turn that around so we can bring good jobs, bring prosperity back to the United Kingdom.
Chancellor, do you worry about wealthy taxpayers moving to Europe? What can you tell us about non-doms?
Well, we were really clear in our manifesto that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your taxes here. And that's what the outgoing Conservative government were looking to do as well. But it is important that we bring in that tax revenue, and that if you live here, you should contribute to investment in our health service, in our defence, in our law and order. And that will happen under this Labour government. But we want Britain to be a really attractive place for investors and businesses and successful wealth creators and entrepreneurs from around the world. And that's why we're determined to unlock our economy for private sector investment through the planning reforms, through the National Wealth Fund, and indeed through the other changes we're going to bring in, whether that's through the skills system or pensions reform.
But non-doms will be very different to what the Conservatives announced, the plan that you're expecting for them?
Well, there's two differences between what the outgoing government was proposing and what we will do. First of all, we will bring those changes forward by a year. And second, we will make reforms, for example, around inheritance tax. But it is right that if you make Britain your home, you should pay your share of taxes here. And an outdated system based on where your father was born to determine how you're treated in the tax system, that's just not right. It's not fit for a modern economy. Now, of course, we will have rules that if you come to Britain for a short period of time on secondment with work, for example, that we will not be taxing your global income. But if you make Britain your home, if this is your permanent place of residence, then just like everybody else, you should pay your taxes here. We want a modern system fit for a modern economy. We don't have that today. Those are reforms we want to bring in.
Chancellor, when you look at Shein, would you welcome an IPO in the UK, in the City of London?
Well, I welcome the FCA changes just last week to really turbocharge listings in the UK. And I want businesses to choose Britain as a place to list. For the last few years, we've seen story after story about companies delisting from the London Stock Exchange, listing in New York, listing in Europe. I want to turn that around. I want Britain to be the place of choice to make an IPO, to grow your business. That's why I welcome the reforms that the FCA put in place last week. It's also why I'm determined to change our pension system so we can unlock some of those assets under management to help start up and scale up businesses access the capital they need so we can keep more businesses here in Britain.
Chancellor, the US is also really going quite hard on tariffs with China. We're going up to an election. The UK has not really squared with the EU on EV tariffs, for example, or the US. How would you deal as a small open economy with China and Chinese tariffs?
Well, we are a small, open trading economy, and we benefit from those trade links with countries around the world, both for exports and imports, but also for foreign direct investment. And our view is that where possible, we trade, we cooperate, and we challenge in areas where it's important to challenge. But we don't want to close the UK economy down to imports and exports. We benefit from those trade links around the world, including with China.
Chancellor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
With me today in the studio to talk about the interview you just heard is Bloomberg's UK economy senior reporter, Phil Aldrick. Phil, thank you so much for joining us. Now, people have to understand that every time we have a big interview, we're like briefed within an inch of our lives with all the greatest minds at Bloomberg. And Phil, you're one of them. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what the message of the Chancellor was, how we'd prepare for questions, what we'd ask her. What do you think her key message has been? I mean, they've done so much in 2 weeks.
Yeah, they have been very busy. Actually, you speak to the Treasury officials, and they were in the immediately after the election that weekend. They were working away, and that was so they wanted to get going fast. The Labour government. The main thing, obviously, the message she was trying to give was that this is going to be a government that is single-minded about getting growth. And a sort of prerequisite to that is stability. And then the mechanism of growth is going to be investment. And a lot of that is the private sector capital that she wants released. And so these were these kind of three things that which sort of guide the agenda, her sort of philosophy of how to get the UK strong and stable.
I thought it was quite telling that actually, so this is her first TV sit-down interview since being appointed Chancellor. And it's interesting that she spoke to Bloomberg because we speak to businesses. So I don't know whether it was more of a pitch for, private capital money coming from abroad, or is it with businesses and saying, look, we'll achieve growth, but there are going to be very tough decisions ahead.
She clearly wants to win both the investment money and business investment in the UK. She actually said there are no plans that I can draw up in my new office in the Treasury that are going to work unless we have business buy-in, which I thought was quite a good telling line for exactly how she's thinking about this. So obviously they've their premises, as she has made clear, she kept saying, I'm going to level with the public, I'm honest, I'm different, I'm not going to pretend that we can spend when we can't spend, which does set up a sort of interesting budget spending review situation in the future. But the fact is that the inheritance is pretty poor, so they don't have much money. So where do you get the growth from? You have to get it from the private markets. Effectively, you sort of leverage it in and hope that that's going to be the mechanism. And obviously the stability of this kind of fiscal lock that they have set up so that the OBR will always judge whether the government is establishing a sort of stable economic future by testing any of their spending programs, which are £30 billion or more. So that will be an automatic thing now. Those things will be absolutely vital to setting the sort of bedrock for the UK to try and build our sort of growth trajectory from there.
Who do you think that speaks to? Again, it's almost like self-imposing budget rules, right, with an independent third party that looks at what you're trying to do and trying to spend. Will that be reassuring for global markets that we're not going to have a Liz Truss moment? And she was very clear that, she never wants that to happen. Or is she trying to do a precedent so that no matter what happens 4, 5, 6 years, that mini budget meltdown doesn't happen again?
If you look back to sort of before the pandemic, it never happened that you would have, it's 1% of GDP of either spending, uncosted spending or uncosted tax cuts. The OBR is obliged to step in and do an assessment of, what is the scale of the black hole that this will cause. So it effectively will make any government nervous about doing anything which is uncosted because they know that they're going to have someone breathing down their neck straight away. Now, the clear point of that is because we had the LDI crisis or whatever, is that you're effectively giving any future government reason for thought or just a pause for thought before doing these big uncosted things. So yeah, that should be reassuring to the asset manager market, to the gilt markets, etc. It should in theory prevent another LDI type trust mini budget problem emerging. So she's definitely talking to the big pools of capital out there that are going to be buying government debt. And she actually named Aviva and Legal & General as some of the backers for her National Wealth Fund, so that she's saying we are getting these buy-in from the investment community.
What's the one question you wish she answered?
It's the tax rises. What are you get? Which tax is going to go up? And actually, you did ask that. When is the budget? She said that we're going to tell you when the budget is at the end of July, and that itself is a little bit of a revelation because it does suggest that the budget won't be until the earliest the budget will be is October, because there's kind of this 10-week lead-in period for the OBR. Will there be a one-year spending review or a more comprehensive spending review, so that the one-year one would just give them time to see if their growth plans worked? Now, these are really important judgments to make, because if you go for a big comprehensive 3 or 5 year spending review right now, the public finances are not strong enough to support like a load of spending without massive tax rises that would accompany it. If you wait a year and you get the growth which they say they're going to do, then maybe you just have fewer tax rises to pay for these spending requirements for the public services, which she described as dilapidated. So I wish she'd answered those questions. And she of course she dodged them, being a politician. But I did think that this she did say about
on China. She was quite interested. Yeah, on China. I mean, that was like our last question. Given everything that's happening in the U.S. with the noise, and of course the U.S. election, the fact that they're really bashing China really hard, and even the EU is getting on board with tariffs against Chinese EVs. She was much more measured. Careful even.
Yeah, I thought that was quite striking. I mean, if you think about what's going to happen if Trump wins, and you look at what's happening, as you say, with the EU and Chinese EVs, and she was like, we are a small open trading economy. We like imports and exports. We need foreign direct investment. It was like, it's absolutely, if you are staying where we want people's money, you can't say that at the same time as saying, we think China is a security risk or something. So that was very sort of subtly revealing. And also, you asked about Xi'an, or however you say it. The sort of
she didn't say the word Xi'an. I mean, so no one knows how to pronounce it, despite us doing like a whole podcast on it with Andrea Felsted. But she welcomes IPOs. This would be a controversial one, though.
Yeah, it was quite striking before the election, actually, that we had Johnny Reynolds, the Labour business secretary now, and Kemi Badenoch, who was the business secretary for the Tories. And you had Johnny Reynolds saying, yeah, we think that you should have these kind of companies in the UK so we can keep an eye on them. And Kemi Badenoch's version of events was no, she was much tougher. She was like, there's questions about, whether the labour rights and other controversies that Shine is facing. So, that obviously Labour they see themselves as a sort of, they're going to be they're going to be careful, as you said, as a perfect word, but they're going to be careful about any decision making, because they're so acutely aware that the future for the country in their minds depends on the investment that we get from the capital markets and from the private sector and from businesses.
Which is why she wouldn't really talk about a growth figure, right? I mean, Keir Starmer floated at 2.5% growth target, but then she wouldn't be pinned down on a specific number.
I suspect that Keir Starmer regrets getting pinned down. He was pressed and pressed in his interview, and so she was going to try not to repeat.
She succeeded.
Yeah, exactly. 2.5% is very ambitious. And I think she's probably aware that 2.5%, given that, the Bank of England has its estimate of our sort of growth potential at little more than 1%. So for us to be achieving sort of 2.5% regularly, that would be a step change.
Yeah, she said she wanted the UK to be the fastest growing G7 economy.
Yeah, that also depends on how the others do, though, doesn't it?
Smart answer, Chancellor. Yeah. Phil, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this week's In the City from Bloomberg. The episode was hosted by me, Francine Lacqua. It was produced and sound designed by Moses Andam. Production support by Summer Sadi. Brendan Francis Newman is our executive producer. Sage Bauman is head of podcasts. Special thanks to Phil Aldrick and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts.